This movie was released in 2018. The Equalizer 2 brings back one of the most controlled, intense, and quietly dangerous characters in modern action cinema, Robert McCall. Directed by Antoine Fuqua and starring Denzel Washington, this sequel does something rare in Hollywood. It does not just repeat the formula of the first film. Instead, it deepens the character, expands his emotional world, and turns a revenge-driven thriller into a personal story about loyalty, justice, and betrayal. This is the first sequel of Denzel Washington's long career, which already makes it significant. But what makes it even more interesting is how the movie shifts its focus. The first film was about McCall stepping back into violence to protect the innocent. The second film is more intimate. It is not about random criminals. It is about someone close to him, someone he trusted, and that makes every decision, every fight, and every moment of tension feel heavier. At its core, The Equalizer 2 is a character-driven action thriller. Yes, there are brutal fight scenes. Yes, there are explosions, gunshots, and carefully choreographed combat. But the heart of the movie is not chaos. It is control. McCall is not a reckless hero. He is precise. He studies people. He plans. He calculates. Every move he makes has purpose. And that calm intensity is what defines the film's identity. The story begins with McCall living a quiet life once again. He works as a Lyft driver, blending into society. He helps strangers in small but meaningful ways. He checks on an elderly Holocaust survivor. He mentors a troubled teenager named Miles. On the surface, he seems at peace. But we quickly understand that he still operates in the shadows. If someone is in danger and the system fails them, McCall steps in. The turning point comes when Susan Plummer, his former colleague and close friend from his government days, is murdered while investigating a suspicious case overseas. Her death is not random. It is deliberate. And when McCall realizes that the people responsible are highly trained professionals, the story transforms from quiet drama into a focused mission of justice. What makes this introduction powerful is how personal everything feels. This is not about saving the world. It is about honoring a friendship. It is about betrayal from within. It is about trust being broken. The enemies McCall faces are not street-level criminals. They are former operatives. Men who once fought beside him. That adds layers of emotional tension. The film also introduces a powerful backdrop, an approaching hurricane. As the story builds toward its climax, nature itself becomes part of the conflict. The storm is not just weather. It symbolizes the emotional storm inside McCall. Calm on the outside, furious underneath. Denzel Washington's presence carries the entire introduction. His performance is restrained. He rarely raises his voice. He rarely shows panic. But his eyes tell the story. There is grief when he learns about Susan. There is disappointment when he uncovers betrayal. And there is unwavering resolve when he decides what must be done. From a YouTube storytelling perspective, this movie stands out because it combines three elements perfectly: emotional stakes, moral clarity, and tactical action. McCall does not kill for pleasure. He acts because he believes in balance. If someone causes harm, he corrects it. That philosophy is simple, but the situations are complex. The introduction of The Equalizer 2 sets up a darker, more personal chapter in McCall's life. It promises intense action, but more importantly, it promises emotional confrontation. It asks a simple question: what happens when the protector becomes the target? And what happens when justice becomes personal? This sequel is not louder than the first film. It is sharper. It is colder. It feels more calculated. And by the time the opening act settles, we understand one thing clearly. This time, the Equalizer is not just balancing strangers' problems. He is settling his own. The Equalizer 2 is a 2018 American action thriller directed by Antoine Fuqua. It serves as the sequel to the 2014 film The Equalizer, which was also directed by Fuqua and starred Denzel Washington in the lead role. The screenplay was written by Richard Wenk, who returned after writing the first film. The movie continues the story of Robert McCall, a former Black Ops operative who now lives a quiet life while secretly delivering justice to those who cannot protect themselves. The film was produced by Todd Black, Jason Blumenthal, Steve Tisch, Antoine Fuqua, Denzel Washington, and Alex Siskin. It was distributed by Columbia Pictures and released in the United States on July 20, 2018. The movie runs for approximately 121 minutes, making it just over 2 hours long. It is rated R due to strong violence, language, and some disturbing content, which aligns with the intense and realistic tone of the story. Denzel Washington reprises his role as Robert McCall, marking the first time in his long and respected career that he has returned for a sequel. His involvement was one of the most anticipated aspects of the film. Alongside Washington, the cast includes Pedro Pascal as Dave York, Ashton Sanders as Miles Whitaker, Orson Bean as Sam Rubinstein, Bill Pullman as Brian Plummer, and Melissa Leo as Susan Plummer. Each supporting character plays a meaningful role in shaping the emotional direction of the story. The film was shot in various locations, including Massachusetts, particularly in Boston and the surrounding coastal areas. These locations play a significant part in the atmosphere of the film, especially during the intense final act, which takes place in a small seaside town during a powerful hurricane. The setting adds both visual tension and symbolic weight to the story. The genre of The Equalizer 2 falls primarily under action and thriller, but it also includes elements of crime drama and character-driven storytelling. Unlike many modern action films that focus heavily on spectacle, this movie emphasizes methodical pacing, emotional stakes, and grounded realism. The action scenes are carefully choreographed and built around strategy rather than chaos. This gives the film a mature and controlled tone. The music score was composed by Harry Gregson Williams, who also worked on the first film. The score supports the suspenseful mood of the movie and enhances the emotional layers beneath the surface. The sound design is sharp and detailed, especially during combat sequences, where silence and sudden impact are used strategically. The cinematography was handled by Oliver Wood. His camera work focuses on steady framing, controlled movement, and close attention to character expressions. The visual tone of the film uses darker color palettes, especially in night scenes, to reflect the serious and personal nature of the story. Financially, The Equalizer 2 was made with an estimated budget of around $62 million. It performed well at the global box office, earning over $190 million worldwide. This made it a commercial success and proved that audiences were still strongly connected to the character of Robert McCall. Critically, the film received mixed to positive reviews. Many critics praised Denzel Washington's performance, highlighting his calm intensity and commanding screen presence. The action sequences were also appreciated for their realism and tension. However, some reviews mentioned that the story followed familiar revenge thriller patterns. Despite that, general audiences responded positively, especially fans of the first film. One important detail about The Equalizer 2 is that it expands the emotional depth of its main character. While the first film introduced McCall's sense of justice, the sequel explores his personal relationships and past connections. This shift in focus gives the movie a more intimate feel compared to standard action sequels. Overall, the basic structure of the film remains consistent with the original. A quiet man with a violent past is forced to step back into action when injustice strikes. But this time, the stakes are personal. The professional world McCall once left behind returns to confront him directly. From production team to cast, from budget to box office, The Equalizer 2 stands as a carefully constructed sequel that balances action with emotional storytelling. It maintains the identity of the franchise while deepening its central character. Robert McCall lives a life that appears simple on the surface, but beneath that calm exterior lies a man shaped by war, intelligence work, and loss. Residing in a modest apartment complex in urban Massachusetts, McCall blends seamlessly into the daily rhythm of ordinary life. To his neighbors, he is polite, observant, and dependable. He works as a Lyft driver, spending his days transporting strangers across the city while quietly studying human behavior with the precision of a seasoned operative. His calm demeanor and soft-spoken manner conceal a lethal skill set forged during his years as a Marine and later as a Defense Intelligence Agency operative. Though he has left that world behind, he has not abandoned his personal code. McCall believes deeply in justice, especially for those who lack the power to defend themselves, and when he sees wrongdoing, he intervenes with calculated efficiency. Among the people whose lives intersect with his is a young woman he frequently drives. She is ambitious and hopeful, trying to build a future for herself, yet vulnerable to the dangers of manipulation and exploitation. When she becomes the victim of a cruel assault after being drugged by men she trusted, McCall takes it upon himself to ensure accountability. He first ensures her immediate safety by rushing her to the hospital to have her stomach pumped, remaining composed while others might panic. After confirming she will recover, he begins tracking down those responsible. His approach is not impulsive rage but meticulous investigation. When he confronts the perpetrators, his actions are swift and merciless, reflecting a man who understands violence intimately and knows precisely how to apply it. For McCall, justice is not symbolic, it is decisive and final. His compassion extends beyond physical protection. In his apartment building lives Sam Rubinstein, an elderly Holocaust survivor burdened by decades of unresolved grief. During World War II, Sam and his sister were separated when the Nazis transported them to different concentration camps. Sam survived, but he lost all trace of his sister. The only remaining connection to his past is a painting that once belonged to their family. When Sam discovers that the painting has resurfaced and is scheduled to be auctioned, he is devastated to learn he cannot prove ownership. Without documentation, his story is dismissed. McCall recognizes that this is not merely about art but about identity, memory, and justice delayed for generations. Quietly, he begins investigating the painting's provenance, determined to restore something deeply personal to Sam. McCall's intervention reflects his broader philosophy. Justice is not always about punishment. Sometimes it is about restoration. Another important presence in McCall's life is Miles Whitaker, a talented yet troubled teenager living in the same complex. Miles possesses genuine artistic ability but struggles with temptation and negative influences pulling him toward criminal activity. McCall sees in Miles a reflection of lost potential and decides to mentor him. Rather than preaching, he offers structure, accountability, and opportunity. When the apartment courtyard is vandalized, McCall encourages Miles to repaint it, turning destruction into creation. The project becomes symbolic of a second chance. McCall understands that prevention is as meaningful as retribution, and guiding Miles away from violence is as important as confronting those who embrace it. Despite his efforts to maintain a stable life, McCall remains connected to his former world through Susan Plummer, a trusted friend and DIA colleague. Susan has long respected McCall's analytical mind and moral clarity. When she is assigned to investigate an apparent murder-suicide in Brussels involving a DIA agent and his wife, she senses inconsistencies. The scene appears staged, and subtle details suggest external involvement. She calls in Dave York, another former teammate of McCall's, to assist with the investigation. Together, they travel to Belgium to examine the evidence firsthand. Initially, the case seems procedural, but Susan's instincts tell her there is more beneath the surface. Tragically, while in Brussels, Susan is attacked in her hotel room after separating from York. The assault is violent and deliberate, staged to resemble a robbery gone wrong. By the time authorities respond, Susan is dead. The official explanation points to a botched theft, but when news reaches McCall in Massachusetts, he immediately senses deception. Grief does not overwhelm him. Instead, it sharpens his focus. He begins reviewing the details with clinical precision. The killers knew the exact floor of Susan's room, indicating prior knowledge. The positioning of the bodies in the Brussels case she was investigating also contradicts the murder-suicide narrative. McCall reconstructs the scenes mentally, identifying inconsistencies that confirm his suspicion. Susan was killed because she uncovered something significant. McCall informs Dave York of his findings, presenting his analysis calmly. York appears receptive, but subtle shifts in tone and posture do not escape McCall's notice. His instincts tell him that betrayal may be closer than he anticipated. Before he can fully pursue that line of inquiry, danger arrives directly. During one of his Lyft shifts, McCall picks up a passenger whose behavior immediately raises suspicion. The man's breathing pattern, posture, and concealed tensions signal imminent threat. Within moments, the passenger attacks, attempting to kill him. The confined space of the car becomes a battleground, but McCall's training prevails. He neutralizes the attacker efficiently and retrieves the man's phone, discovering it is secured with military-grade encryption. This was not random violence, it was a targeted hit. Back home, McCall dedicates himself to breaking the encryption. His technical expertise, combined with patience and discipline, eventually grants him access to the device's contents. What he finds confirms his worst suspicion: the attack was ordered by someone with intimate knowledge of his past. Rather than immediately confronting the truth, McCall devises a strategic approach. The next morning, he visits Dave York under the pretense of seeking help with the encrypted phone. York agrees to assist, unaware that McCall has already unlocked it. During their conversation, McCall calmly calls York using the assassin's phone, forcing an undeniable connection. The atmosphere shifts instantly as silence replaces pretense. Without theatrics, McCall confronts York directly. He states that he knows York ordered the hit on both him and Susan. After a brief pause, York admits it. He reveals that he personally finished Susan off when the hired assassins failed to complete the job. York explains that after McCall faked his own death years earlier, the remaining team abandoned their original principles and became mercenaries, selling their lethal expertise for profit. The Brussels incident involved one such operation, and Susan was on the verge of exposing them. To protect himself and the others, York chose elimination over loyalty. With that confession, the conflict transforms from investigation to reckoning. McCall is no longer pursuing anonymous enemies. He is confronting former brothers-in-arms who have embraced corruption. The quiet life he built is shattered, and the storm he once walked away from now returns with personal stakes. The confession from Dave York changes everything. What began as quiet suspicion hardens into undeniable betrayal, and Robert McCall fully understands that the war he thought he left behind has returned with a personal vendetta. York is not acting alone. He is part of a small, highly trained circle, former teammates who once operated under the same flag, trusted each other with their lives, and now operate as mercenaries. Resnick, Ari, and Kovac are not amateurs. They are disciplined, tactical, and lethal. McCall knows that confronting them will require more than brute force. It will demand patience, psychological pressure, and strategic positioning. This is no longer about uncovering the truth. It is about dismantling a threat that knows him almost as well as he knows them. McCall arranges a meeting with the 3 remaining operatives. The encounter is tense but controlled, filled with subtext rather than overt aggression. No weapons are drawn, yet the hostility is unmistakable. Words are exchanged carefully, each sentence layered with warning. McCall makes it clear that he understands their involvement in Susan's death and the Brussels cover-up. They respond with veiled threats, suggesting that pursuing this path will end badly for him. Beneath the conversation lies a shared understanding: violence is inevitable. The meeting ends not with resolution but with escalation. Both sides walk away knowing that preparation has already begun. Meanwhile, the threat extends beyond McCall himself. Resnick and Ari move to eliminate loose ends, targeting Susan's husband, Brian. They assume he may possess information or become an unpredictable liability. McCall anticipates this move. His ability to forecast their strategy is rooted in years of shared operational history. He intercepts Brian before the mercenaries can reach him, extracting him from immediate danger. This act reinforces the core difference between McCall and his former teammates. While they eliminate risks through death, he neutralizes them through protection. He safeguards Brian not simply out of obligation to Susan, but because it aligns with his code. Collateral damage is unacceptable. York and Kovac, recognizing McCall's interference, shift tactics. Instead of targeting peripheral individuals, they strike at something closer to his present life. They infiltrate his apartment complex with calculated efficiency, capturing Miles. The young man becomes leverage, a pawn in a larger strategic maneuver. For York, this is not merely about eliminating McCall. It is about forcing him into vulnerability. By taking Miles hostage, They send a clear message: McCall's attempt to build a peaceful life has created liabilities. Every connection is a weakness to be exploited. However, York miscalculates one critical factor. McCall does not react impulsively. He does not charge recklessly into confrontation. Instead, he studies the situation. He deduces that York will attempt to control the environment, selecting terrain that provides tactical advantage. McCall understands their shared mindset and predicts their movements. His next decision reflects both nostalgia and strategy. He returns to his seaside hometown, a place tied to memories of his late wife and quieter times. The town is largely evacuated due to an approaching hurricane, creating an isolated battleground. For most people, the storm represents chaos and danger. For McCall, it is cover. As hurricane winds intensify and rain begins to lash the coastline, McCall methodically prepares the town. He converts ordinary structures into defensive traps, using hardware-store tools, fishing equipment, and environmental hazards. Every doorway becomes a choke point. Every room becomes a potential kill zone. His preparations demonstrate not improvisation but disciplined foresight. He understands that his former teammates will arrive armed, coordinated, and confident. What they do not anticipate is his mastery of controlled environments. York, Resnick, Ari, and Kovac breach the police barricade guarding the evacuated zone, with York shooting the state trooper to gain entry. The action underscores their complete moral collapse. They are no longer constrained by loyalty or restraint. As they enter the storm-ravaged town, visibility is limited and communication becomes strained. York positions himself at a watchtower, establishing a sniper vantage point to oversee the operation. From there, he directs his team inward, confident that superior firepower will compensate for environmental disadvantage. Kovac is the first to engage directly. Seeking to flush McCall out, he enters a tackle shop. Inside, the darkness conceals more than abandoned merchandise. McCall uses the space to his advantage, disorienting Kovac before confronting him at close range. The fight is brutal and efficient. McCall ultimately kills Kovac with a harpoon gun, a weapon chosen not for spectacle but for necessity. The message is clear: this battlefield belongs to him. Ari advances next, navigating through wind and rain toward the shoreline. Along his path, he encounters photographs of Susan strategically placed to provoke emotional distraction. The psychological tactic works. Ari hesitates, and in that moment of divided attention, McCall strikes. The confrontation is swift, ending with Ari mortally wounded. Each engagement reduces York's advantage while reinforcing McCall's dominance within the terrain. Resnick attempts to regain momentum by pursuing McCall into his late wife's old bakery. The building is layered with traps, each calibrated to exploit aggressive entry tactics. Resnick deploys a flashbang grenade, intending to disorient McCall. Instead, it triggers a carefully prepared countermeasure. The resulting chain reaction leaves Resnick fatally injured. McCall's understanding of explosive dynamics and structural vulnerabilities transforms Resnick's own strategy into a fatal error. With his team dismantled, York grows desperate. From the watchtower, he identifies McCall's vehicle and discovers Miles bound inside the trunk. He attempts to use Miles as leverage, firing at the car to force McCall into open exposure. However, York exhausts his ammunition, underestimating the duration and complexity of the confrontation. The storm intensifies, wind battering the tower structure as York descends to confront McCall directly. What began as calculated pursuit devolves into survival. As lightning splits the sky and waves crash violently against the rocky shore, McCall and York ascend the tower. Their final confrontation is stripped of intermediaries and strategy. It becomes personal. York attempts to rationalize his choices, framing them as pragmatic adaptations to a world that rewards ruthlessness. McCall rejects that philosophy entirely. For him, discipline without morality is corruption. Their physical struggle reflects years of shared training, but fatigue and injury narrow the margin. Ultimately, McCall gains the upper hand, stabbing York and pushing him over the edge of the tower. York's body falls onto the jagged shoreline below, swallowed moments later by the relentless surf. The storm continues, indifferent to human conflict, but the immediate threat is extinguished. McCall retrieves Miles from the trunk and carries him to safety, treating his wounds inside his old house. In the aftermath of violence, his first act is restoration rather than reflection. The battlefield is quiet again, the hurricane gradually subsiding. What remains is resolution, not just of vengeance, but of betrayal. The chapter tied to his former team has closed permanently. When the storm finally passes, the seaside town is left battered but standing, much like Robert McCall himself. The violent winds that tore through buildings and flooded the shoreline mirror the emotional tempest that forced him to confront his past. Yet as dawn breaks and the skies clear, there is an unmistakable stillness. The threat that emerged from his former life has been eliminated. Dave York and the remaining mercenaries are gone, swallowed by consequences of their own choices. McCall does not celebrate the outcome. For him, violence is never triumph, it is necessity. With Miles safely freed from the trunk of the car and treated for his injuries inside the old house that once belonged to McCall and his late wife, the immediate crisis is resolved. What remains is rebuilding. Miles awakens shaken but alive, having witnessed firsthand the cost of the path he once flirted with. The experience leaves an imprint deeper than fear. He has seen the difference between destruction and discipline, between chaos and purpose. McCall does not lecture him about what happened. Instead, he offers steady reassurance and a simple directive: choose a better direction. For McCall, mentorship is not about control but about accountability. He understands that Miles must decide who he wants to become. The events of the storm have drawn a clear contrast between two futures, one embodied by York and his team, the other by McCall's code of justice. After ensuring Miles is stable, McCall returns to Massachusetts. The apartment complex feels different now, quieter yet heavier with memory. Susan's absence lingers in every conversation. Her role in his life was not merely professional. She represented connection to a time when service still aligned with principle. To honor her memory, McCall continues the work she began. Among her investigative materials was information that would prove crucial to resolving Sam Rubinstein's decades-long search. Through Susan's findings, documentation surfaces that authenticates the provenance of the painting tied to Sam's family. The auction house can no longer deny ownership. What once seemed lost to history is restored through evidence and persistence. The reunion that follows is understated yet profound. Sam, believing his sister gone forever, is reunited with her after years of separation. The painting becomes more than an object. It becomes proof that survival can coexist with recovery. McCall watches quietly, satisfied not by recognition but by outcome. Justice, in this instance, required patience rather than force. It demonstrates that his skill set extends beyond combat. He is equally capable of navigating bureaucracy, uncovering records, and assembling facts until truth prevails. In restoring the painting and reconnecting siblings separated by atrocity, McCall reaffirms his belief that justice is not defined solely by punishment but also by healing. Miles, meanwhile, returns to the apartment complex with a transformed perspective. The courtyard he once helped repaint now symbolizes resilience. He finishes the work he started, applying careful strokes with renewed focus. The act of painting becomes meditative, a reclaiming of identity. Encouraged by McCall, he returns to school and dedicates himself to his art. Where temptation once loomed, ambition now takes root. On a bus ride, as he sketches a superhero in his notebook, another passenger asks what kind of hero he is drawing. Miles describes someone who appears ordinary but steps in when others cannot. A man who evens the odds. A man who brings balance. The word he uses is simple yet precise: the equalizer. For McCall, the title is neither chosen nor proclaimed. It emerges organically from those he has influenced. He does not wear a costume or seek acknowledgement. His heroism lies in intervention at critical moments, in preventing irreversible harm, in restoring equilibrium when injustice tips the scale. The confrontation with York's team underscores this principle. They represented a perversion of skill without morality, professionals who commodified violence. McCall represents the counterpoint, skill guided by restraint and governed by conscience. Having moved back into his old seaside home, McCall embraces solitude once more. The ocean stretches before him, calm now, its earlier fury reduced to gentle waves against rock. The house holds memories of his wife, of quieter years before betrayal and bloodshed resurfaced. Yet the space no longer feels haunted by unfinished business. By confronting York and dismantling the mercenary operation, McCall has severed the last tie to a compromised past. The DIA chapter is closed not through avoidance but through decisive resolution. Despite the closure, McCall remains vigilant. His nature does not permit complacency. He continues driving his Lyft routes, observing the city's patterns and its vulnerabilities. Each passenger is a story, each neighborhood a network of unseen struggles. He does not actively seek conflict, but he recognizes that injustice is persistent. The world continues to produce individuals who exploit the weak. McCall's role is not institutional, it is personal. He operates outside formal structures, guided by an internal metric that evaluates right and wrong with clinical clarity. Susan's legacy influences him profoundly. Her commitment to truth, even at personal risk, reinforces his belief that silence in the face of corruption is complicity. Though her death initiated the conflict, it also reaffirmed his responsibility. Justice, for McCall, is not episodic. It is continuous. Whether confronting violent criminals or navigating legal channels to recover stolen heritage, he remains consistent in purpose. The difference lies only in method. The final image of McCall standing at the window, looking out toward the tranquil sea, encapsulates this equilibrium. The storm has passed, but storms are inevitable in any era. What distinguishes McCall is not his ability to avoid them but his readiness to endure and neutralize them. His life oscillates between stillness and action, between anonymity and intervention. He does not chase recognition, nor does he retreat from obligation. He exists in the space between ordinary and extraordinary, stepping forward only when the scales demand adjustment. In the broader narrative, the events surrounding York's betrayal serve as a cautionary study in moral divergence. Two men trained under identical circumstances chose opposite trajectories. One rationalized corruption as evolution, the other preserved principle as foundation. The outcome validates McCall's philosophy: skill without ethics breeds destruction, while discipline anchored in justice sustains order. The Equalizer is not defined by violence but by balance. As the sun sets over the horizon, casting golden light across the water, McCall remains composed. The world is imperfect, unpredictable, and often cruel. Yet within that uncertainty, there is room for individuals who refuse to look away. McCall does not claim to save the world. He corrects imbalances one situation at a time. And somewhere in Massachusetts, in a painted courtyard, in a reunited family, and in the determined strokes of a young artist's sketchbook, the impact of his quiet interventions continues to ripple outward. The Equalizer too follows a deliberate and methodical narrative structure that mirrors the personality of its main character, Robert McCall. The story is not rushed. It unfolds in controlled layers, allowing tension to build gradually before delivering explosive moments of action. The structure can be divided into four major movements: the calm before disruption, the inciting betrayal, the investigation and moral confrontation, and the storm-driven climax. The film opens with a contained but intense sequence set on a train in Turkey. McCall is tracking down a group of men who have kidnapped a young American girl. This opening scene functions as a mission statement. It reintroduces McCall's skill set, his patience, and his precise approach to violence. He studies his targets. He observes their weaknesses. Then he strikes quickly and decisively. This first sequence establishes that although McCall appears to live quietly, he is still actively operating as a vigilante. After this sharp opening, the narrative shifts into a slower and more grounded rhythm. McCall is now working as a Lyft driver in Boston. These scenes are intentionally calm. He drives passengers, listens to their stories, and subtly intervenes when someone is in trouble. The pacing here is steady and character-focused. We see him mentoring a troubled teenager named Miles and maintaining a quiet friendship with his former colleague Susan Plummer. These moments create emotional grounding. They humanize McCall and build relationships that will later raise the stakes. The inciting incident occurs when Susan Plummer is murdered while investigating what initially appears to be a murder-suicide involving a former intelligence operative. Her death shifts the narrative direction sharply. The calm structure fractures. The story transitions from episodic acts of justice to a focused investigation. This is the turning point that defines the film's second act. From here, the narrative becomes investigative and strategic. McCall begins analyzing the details surrounding Susan's case. The pacing remains controlled but grows heavier with tension. Instead of immediate revenge, the film emphasizes deduction. McCall traces connections, examines motives, and slowly uncovers that the crime is part of a larger conspiracy involving former operatives. This portion of the narrative is structured like a chess game. Every move reveals another layer of betrayal. The midpoint revelation is critical. McCall discovers that Dave York, a former teammate and trusted friend, is behind the operation. This is not just a plot twist. It is an emotional rupture. The structure pivots again, transforming from mystery to personal confrontation. The antagonist is no longer unknown criminals. It is someone from McCall's own past. The stakes become deeply personal. The third movement of the narrative focuses on moral opposition. McCall confronts York directly, but the confrontation is restrained rather than explosive. York attempts to justify his actions by claiming the world is driven by survival and profit. McCall represents the opposite philosophy. He believes in moral accountability. This ideological clash adds depth to the story's structure. The conflict is not just physical. It is ethical. As the story moves toward its climax, the setting becomes increasingly isolated. York and his team travel to a coastal town where McCall owns a house. A hurricane approaches, and most residents evacuate. This environmental shift is deliberate. The empty town creates a contained battlefield. The storm acts as both a literal and symbolic force, reflecting the emotional turbulence between former allies. The final act is structured as a tactical showdown. McCall uses the hurricane to his advantage, separating and eliminating York's team members one by one. The pacing accelerates but remains calculated. Each confrontation is deliberate, reflecting McCall's strategic mind. The sound of wind and debris replaces traditional background music, intensifying the realism of the sequence. The climax culminates in a direct fight between McCall and York. It is personal and physical, stripped of large spectacle. When McCall finally defeats York, the resolution feels earned rather than exaggerated. Justice is restored, but not without emotional cost. The final moments of the film slow the pacing again. The storm passes. The town begins to recover. McCall reconnects with Miles, guiding him toward a better future. The structure comes full circle, returning to quiet mentorship rather than chaos. Overall, the narrative flow of The Equalizer 2 mirrors a rising storm. It begins calmly, builds tension through investigation and betrayal, explodes into controlled violence, and then settles into reflective closure. The pacing is intentional. The structure prioritizes character motivation over non-stop action. This disciplined narrative design reinforces the film's core identity: calculated justice delivered with precision. In The Equalizer 2, character development is not loud or dramatic on the surface. It is subtle, controlled, and deeply internal, especially when it comes to Robert McCall. The film does not rely only on action to tell its story. Instead, it carefully explores emotional growth, moral conviction, betrayal, and mentorship. Every major character experiences some form of shift, but the most important transformation belongs to McCall himself. At the beginning of the film, Robert McCall appears settled. He is living a structured life in Boston, working as a Lyft driver, maintaining routines, and helping strangers in quiet ways. He seems disciplined and calm. However, this calm is not peace. It is containment. McCall is a man constantly holding back his violent abilities. He has not escaped his past. He has simply organized it. His early interactions with passengers show patience and empathy. He protects a young woman from exploitation. He comforts an elderly Holocaust survivor named Sam. These moments reveal that McCall is not motivated by anger. He is motivated by responsibility. The death of Susan Plummer becomes the emotional trigger that tests his development. Susan is not just a colleague. She is one of the last connections to his former life. Her murder forces McCall to confront unfinished ties to his past. This is where his character arc becomes more personal than in the first film. In the original story, he protected strangers. In this sequel, he must confront betrayal from someone he once trusted. As McCall investigates Susan's death, we see a shift from calm observation to controlled intensity. His moral code remains consistent. He believes in balance and accountability. But emotionally, there is disappointment beneath his actions. When he discovers that Dave York, his former teammate, is responsible, the betrayal cuts deeper than any physical threat. York represents what McCall could have become if he had chosen profit over principle. McCall's arc is not about becoming more violent. It is about reaffirming who he is. York argues that survival and money justify their actions. McCall rejects that philosophy. This confrontation clarifies McCall's identity. He is not just a former operative. He is a man who believes that power must protect, not exploit. His decision to eliminate York is not revenge fueled by rage. It is justice rooted in conviction. Another significant character arc belongs to Miles Whitaker, the teenager McCall mentors. Miles is talented but lost. He is surrounded by negative influences and struggling with direction. At first, Miles is defensive and distant. He does not fully trust McCall. But through steady guidance, McCall becomes a father figure. This relationship softens McCall's image. It shows that he is capable of nurturing, not just destroying. Miles' arc parallels McCall's internal journey. Both stand at crossroads. Miles must choose between gangs and education. McCall must choose between isolation and connection. By the end of the film, Miles decides to pursue art school, symbolizing hope and forward movement. McCall's mentorship succeeds. Through Miles, we see that McCall is trying to build something, not just tear things down. Dave York's arc operates in contrast. York begins as a respected former partner. He appears stable, professional, and friendly. But as the story unfolds, his true motivations surface. He has chosen financial gain over loyalty. He justifies murder as part of a new world order where morality is secondary to survival. York does not change during the story. Instead, the audience's perception of him changes. His arc is a reveal rather than a transformation. He embodies corruption within the system McCall once served. Susan Plummer's role, though limited by her early death, also shapes the narrative arc. She represents integrity within intelligence work. Her investigation into corruption demonstrates that she never abandoned ethical responsibility. Her death becomes the catalyst for McCall's emotional confrontation with his past. By the end of the film, McCall returns to a quieter state. However, this quiet is different from the beginning. It is no longer just containment. It is acceptance. He cannot fully escape who he is, but he can choose how to use it. He strengthens his bond with Miles and continues helping those in need. The character development in The Equalizer 2 is grounded in moral clarity. McCall does not evolve into a different person. Instead, he is tested and proven. His arc reinforces his identity as a guardian guided by principle. Through betrayal, mentorship, and confrontation, the film deepens his humanity while preserving his disciplined strength. In The Equalizer 2, performances are the foundation that hold the film together. While the movie contains intense action and suspense, it is the acting that gives emotional weight to every scene. The cast does not rely on exaggerated expressions or dramatic speeches. Instead, most of the performances are controlled, layered, and restrained. This style perfectly matches the tone of the film. Denzel Washington's portrayal of Robert McCall is the centerpiece. His performance is built on subtlety. He does not play McCall as a loud or explosive hero. Instead, he presents him as calm, observant, and emotionally disciplined. Washington uses small facial movements, pauses in speech, and steady eye contact to communicate what McCall is thinking. Often, the tension in a scene comes from silence rather than dialogue. When McCall studies someone before acting, Washington lets the audience see the calculation happening internally. That internal process creates suspense. One of the strongest aspects of Washington's performance is emotional restraint. When Susan Plummer dies, McCall does not break down publicly. There is no dramatic outburst. Instead, Washington shows grief through stillness. His posture stiffens. His voice lowers. His eyes become heavier. This controlled reaction feels more realistic than exaggerated emotion. It shows that McCall processes pain quietly but deeply. Washington also brings credibility to the physical aspects of the role. Even in his 60s during filming, he performs with precision and authority. His movements in fight scenes are deliberate. He does not move like a superhero. He moves like a trained professional who understands timing and efficiency. That grounded physical performance makes the action believable. Pedro Pascal plays Dave York, the film's primary antagonist. Pascal's performance is measured and confident. He does not portray York as obviously evil from the beginning. Instead, he presents him as charming and professional. This approach makes the eventual betrayal more impactful. Pascal uses calm speech and steady body language to show that York believes in his own justification. When York explains his philosophy about survival and profit, Pascal delivers the lines with conviction, not madness. That choice makes the character more realistic and unsettling. The confrontation scenes between Washington and Pascal are some of the strongest acting moments in the film. Both actors rely on controlled intensity rather than shouting. Their exchanges feel like a battle of ideologies. Washington's quiet certainty clashes with Pascal's rationalized corruption. The tension comes from their opposing beliefs rather than physical aggression. Ashton Sanders, who plays Miles Whitaker, provides emotional contrast. Sanders portrays Miles as talented but uncertain. His performance captures teenage vulnerability without overacting. He shows hesitation in his voice and insecurity in his posture. When interacting with McCall, Sanders shifts gradually from defensive to receptive. This subtle change makes Miles' development believable. Sanders and Washington share strong on-screen chemistry, especially in mentorship scenes. Their conversations feel natural, not forced. Melissa Leo, as Susan Plummer, delivers a performance that communicates intelligence and integrity. Although her screen time is limited, she establishes Susan as capable and principled. Leo brings warmth to her interactions with McCall, which makes her death emotionally significant. Her presence in early scenes creates a sense of trust and familiarity. Bill Pullman, as Brian Plummer, portrays grief with authenticity. After Susan's death, Pullman does not overdramatize his sorrow. He expresses it through quiet devastation. His scenes with Washington feel sincere and grounded. Orson Bean, playing Sam Rubinstein, adds gentle warmth to the film. His portrayal of an elderly Holocaust survivor searching for closure is heartfelt. Bean's soft delivery contrasts with the violence surrounding the main plot, reminding the audience of the human stakes behind McCall's actions. Overall, the acting style across the film is consistent. The performances are restrained, realistic, and emotionally controlled. No one dominates scenes through volume or exaggeration. Instead, tension builds through stillness and conviction. Denzel Washington anchors the entire film with a performance that balances strength and vulnerability. The supporting cast enhances the narrative by maintaining authenticity. The result is a film where acting elevates action. The emotional stakes feel real because the performances are grounded. Through subtle expression, disciplined delivery, and strong chemistry, the cast transforms a standard revenge thriller into a character-driven story about loyalty, betrayal, and responsibility. Antoine Fuqua's direction in The Equalizer 2 reflects a clear and disciplined creative vision. Rather than turning the sequel into a larger, louder version of the first film, Fuqua chooses a more intimate and personal approach. His direction focuses on character psychology, moral tension, and atmosphere just as much as action. This decision defines the identity of the movie and separates it from typical franchise sequels. Fuqua understands that Robert McCall is not a conventional action hero. He is quiet, observant, and methodical. The director builds the film's pacing around these qualities. Scenes are allowed to breathe. Conversations are not rushed. Silence is used strategically. Instead of constant background music or rapid editing, Fuqua often lets moments unfold slowly. This deliberate pacing mirrors McCall's personality and reinforces the idea that every action is calculated. One of Fuqua's strongest directorial choices is his control of tone. The film balances emotional drama with violent confrontation without feeling inconsistent. Early scenes of McCall helping strangers are warm and grounded. The mentorship of Miles is handled with sensitivity. These quieter moments are not treated as filler. Fuqua frames them with the same seriousness as the action sequences. This equal treatment signals that the emotional relationships are just as important as the fight scenes. When violence does occur, Fuqua directs it with precision rather than spectacle. The action sequences are not chaotic. They are structured and tactical. The camera often stays close to McCall, allowing the audience to see his decision-making process. Fuqua avoids excessive slow motion or exaggerated effects. Instead, he emphasizes realism. The result is action that feels impactful and personal rather than flashy. Another important aspect of Fuqua's vision is the use of environment as storytelling. The final act, set in a coastal town during a hurricane, is a clear example. Fuqua transforms the storm into more than a backdrop. The wind, rain, and darkness become active elements of the confrontation. The empty streets create isolation. The storm reflects the emotional intensity between McCall and Dave York. By placing the climax in this setting, Fuqua visually represents the internal conflict between former allies. Fuqua also demonstrates restraint in how he portrays the antagonist. Dave York is not introduced as obviously corrupt. The director allows the audience to see him as professional and composed. This subtle introduction makes the betrayal more powerful. Fuqua does not rely on dramatic villain monologues. Instead, he allows York's philosophy to emerge gradually. This approach strengthens the ideological conflict at the heart of the story. Collaboration with Denzel Washington is another key element of Fuqua's direction. The two have worked together multiple times, and that familiarity is visible. Fuqua trusts Washington's ability to communicate emotion through minimal dialogue. He often frames close-up shots that focus on Washington's eyes and expressions. These visual choices emphasize internal tension rather than external drama. Fuqua's vision also extends to thematic consistency. The film repeatedly explores ideas of justice, loyalty, and moral accountability. Every major scene supports these themes. There are no unnecessary subplots that distract from the central conflict. The narrative remains focused on McCall's personal journey and confrontation with betrayal. Importantly, Fuqua avoids turning McCall into a superhero figure. The direction keeps the character grounded. Injuries have consequences. Emotional loss carries weight. This realism maintains credibility and prevents the film from becoming exaggerated. The visual tone throughout the movie remains serious and subdued. Fuqua avoids overly bright or stylized imagery. The color palette often leans toward darker shades, reinforcing the somber mood. Even daytime scenes feel controlled rather than vibrant. This consistency reflects the disciplined nature of the protagonist. Overall, Antoine Fuqua's direction in The Equalizer 2 demonstrates clarity of purpose. He prioritizes character over chaos, tension over spectacle, and moral conflict over simple revenge. His vision ensures that the sequel deepens the emotional foundation of the franchise rather than simply expanding its scale. Through controlled pacing, environmental symbolism, and restrained action, Fuqua delivers a film that feels focused, mature, and purposeful. The cinematography of The Equalizer 2, handled by Oliver Wood, plays a crucial role in shaping the film's identity. The visual style is controlled, grounded, and deliberate, much like Robert McCall himself. Instead of relying on flashy camera tricks or overly stylized visuals, the film uses framing, lighting, and composition to reinforce mood, tension, and character psychology. Every shot feels intentional. Nothing appears random or excessive. One of the defining characteristics of the cinematography is its restraint. The camera rarely moves without purpose. In dialogue scenes, Wood often uses steady framing and medium close-ups. This allows the audience to focus on facial expressions and subtle emotional shifts. When McCall studies someone, the camera lingers just long enough for viewers to sense his analytical process. These quiet visual pauses create tension without the need for dramatic music or rapid editing. Lighting plays a significant role in establishing tone. The film frequently uses low-key lighting, especially in interior and nighttime scenes. Shadows dominate the frame, symbolizing secrecy and moral complexity. McCall often stands partially in darkness, visually representing his hidden past and dual identity. This contrast between light and shadow reinforces the theme of justice operating outside official systems. Color grading in the film leans toward muted and cool tones. Blues and grays dominate many scenes, particularly in Boston's urban settings. These cooler colors create a serious and somber atmosphere. Warm tones are used sparingly, usually in scenes involving mentorship or personal connection, such as moments between McCall and Miles. This subtle shift in color temperature helps distinguish emotional warmth from professional coldness. The action sequences are shot with clarity rather than chaos. In many modern action films, fast cuts and shaky cameras are used to create intensity. In The Equalizer 2, the cinematography avoids excessive shakiness. Even during fights, the camera remains relatively stable. This allows viewers to understand the choreography and strategy behind McCall's movements. The clarity makes the violence feel precise and calculated instead of overwhelming. Close-up shots are used strategically throughout the film. Denzel Washington's face becomes a focal point in several key moments. His eyes, in particular, are emphasized. These close-ups allow the audience to connect with McCall's internal thoughts without spoken explanation. Oliver Wood often frames McCall slightly off-center, creating subtle imbalance in the composition. This visual choice suggests that although McCall appears calm, there is constant tension beneath the surface. Wide shots are used effectively during the hurricane sequence in the final act. The empty coastal town is captured with expansive framing, emphasizing isolation. As the storm approaches, the cinematography highlights environmental details such as moving debris, flickering lights, and shifting shadows. These elements make the setting feel alive and dangerous. The hurricane is not just weather, it becomes a visual metaphor for emotional confrontation. Another notable aspect of the visual style is the use of reflective surfaces. Windows, mirrors, and glass often appear in scenes where McCall is observing or planning. These reflections subtly reinforce the idea of dual identity. McCall exists in two worlds, the quiet civilian life and the violent operative past. The cinematography visually mirrors that duality. The film also makes strong use of depth within the frame. Background details are rarely blurred without reason. In scenes where McCall evaluates threats, the camera maintains enough focus to show environmental context. This gives the audience the same observational advantage as the protagonist. It creates a sense of participation in his strategic thinking. During confrontations with Dave York, the framing becomes more symmetrical and confrontational. Both characters are often positioned facing each other directly, visually reinforcing ideological opposition. The camera does not exaggerate angles or distort perspective. Instead, it keeps both men grounded and balanced, emphasizing that this conflict is between equals in skill but not in morality. Overall, the cinematography in The Equalizer 2 supports the film's disciplined tone. It avoids unnecessary visual spectacle and instead prioritizes mood, character expression, and environmental storytelling. Through controlled camera movement, strategic lighting, muted color palettes, and precise framing, the visual style enhances the narrative's themes of justice, isolation, and moral clarity. The result is a film that feels visually coherent and emotionally grounded from beginning to end. The editing and pacing of The Equalizer 2 play a central role in shaping the film's tension and emotional rhythm. Edited by Conrad Buff IV, the film does not rely on non-stop speed or constant action to hold attention. Instead, it follows a controlled and deliberate structure that mirrors the personality of Robert McCall. The pacing is thoughtful, calculated, and at times intentionally slow, allowing suspense to build gradually before releasing it in sharp, decisive bursts. One of the most noticeable aspects of the editing is restraint. Many modern action films use rapid cuts and quick transitions to create intensity. In contrast, the Equalizer 2 allows scenes to breathe. Conversations are not interrupted by unnecessary reaction shots. The camera lingers long enough for the audience to absorb emotional details. This slower rhythm builds anticipation because viewers sense that something is coming even when the frame appears calm. In the opening train sequence, the editing establishes this balance clearly. The scene moves at a measured pace as McCall observes his targets. Cuts are spaced carefully, showing his perspective and the positions of the kidnappers. The tension increases not because of fast editing but because of delayed action. When violence finally occurs, the cuts become quicker but never chaotic. The audience can clearly follow each movement. This clarity reinforces McCall's precision. The middle section of the film adopts a slower tempo. After Susan Plummer's death, the editing supports the investigative tone. Scenes of McCall reviewing evidence, questioning contacts, and analyzing patterns are cut in a way that emphasizes thought rather than urgency. Transitions between locations are smooth and logical. There are no sudden jumps that disorient the viewer. This structured flow mirrors McCall's analytical mindset. The pacing also shifts effectively between subplots. The mentorship storyline involving Miles is interwoven with the main investigation. The editing balances these two threads without allowing one to overpower the other. Emotional scenes with Miles are placed strategically between heavier investigative moments. This placement prevents the film from becoming emotionally overwhelming and maintains narrative equilibrium. A significant editing strength appears during confrontations. When McCall faces individuals he intends to eliminate, the timing of cuts becomes sharper. There is often a brief pause before action begins. These pauses create psychological tension. Viewers understand that McCall has already calculated the outcome. Once he moves, the editing becomes slightly faster but still controlled. The fight sequences are concise. They do not extend longer than necessary, reinforcing the idea that McCall operates efficiently. The final hurricane sequence demonstrates dynamic pacing. As the storm intensifies, the editing rhythm tightens. Cuts between McCall, Dave York's team, and the environment become more frequent. However, the editor avoids excessive fragmentation. Each cut serves spatial clarity. The audience always understands where characters are positioned in relation to each other. This spatial awareness increases suspense because viewers can anticipate potential encounters. Sound transitions also support pacing. Moments of silence often precede sudden action. The editor allows silence to stretch just long enough to create discomfort. When violence interrupts that silence, the impact feels stronger. This contrast between quiet and chaos is repeated throughout the film. Importantly, the film avoids unnecessary filler scenes. While the pacing is slower than many action thrillers, it rarely feels stagnant. Each scene contributes either to character development or plot progression. The editing ensures that narrative momentum continues even during quieter moments. The resolution of the film returns to a slower rhythm. After the storm and final confrontation, the pacing deliberately softens. Scenes with Miles and the restored coastal town provide emotional closure. The editor allows these moments to unfold calmly, signaling a return to stability. Overall, the editing and pacing of The Equalizer 2 reflect discipline and control. The film builds tension through patience rather than speed. Action scenes are sharp but concise. Emotional scenes are allowed time to resonate. This balanced approach supports the film's central theme, precision over chaos. Through careful timing, smooth transitions, and controlled escalation, the editing reinforces the calculated nature of its protagonist and maintains suspense from beginning to end. In The Equalizer 2, sound design and music are not just background elements. They are essential tools used to shape tension, emotion, and atmosphere. The film's audio landscape is carefully controlled, just like its main character. Every sound, every moment of silence, and every musical cue is placed with intention. The result is an experience where sound works quietly but powerfully to support the story. The musical score was composed by Harry Gregson Williams, who also worked on the first film. His approach in this sequel continues the same restrained style. Instead of loud, constant orchestration, the score is subtle and atmospheric. It often operates in the background, enhancing mood without drawing attention to itself. This restraint allows the emotional weight of scenes to feel natural rather than forced. One of the most important aspects of the score is its minimalism. During investigative or reflective moments, the music is soft, often built around low strings and ambient tones. These sounds create a feeling of quiet tension. The music does not tell the audience what to feel in an obvious way. Instead, it builds a sense of anticipation. When Robert McCall studies someone or plans his next move, the score remains understated, allowing viewers to focus on his internal process. Silence plays an equally powerful role. In many key scenes, there is little to no music at all. This is especially noticeable before moments of violence. The absence of sound heightens suspense because the audience becomes more aware of small details, like breathing or footsteps. When action finally begins, the sudden impact feels sharper because it breaks the silence. This contrast between quiet and sudden intensity is used repeatedly throughout the film. The sound design during fight sequences is precise and realistic. Punches, impacts, and environmental sounds are clear and distinct. There is no exaggerated or cartoonish audio. Each physical movement has weight. When McCall strikes an opponent, the sound emphasizes the force without overwhelming the scene. This grounded approach reinforces the film's realistic tone. Environmental sound is especially important in the final act, which takes place during a hurricane. The wind becomes a constant presence. It howls through empty streets and rattles windows. Rain hits surfaces with force. Debris moves unpredictably. These natural sounds are layered carefully to create tension. The storm is not just visual. It is auditory. The overwhelming wind and rain isolate the characters and add chaos to the controlled conflict between McCall and his enemies. In quieter scenes, smaller sounds are emphasized. When McCall drives his car, the hum of the engine and city traffic create a sense of normal life. When he enters an apartment or building, subtle creaks and echoes signal space and distance. These details make the world feel real and immersive. Dialogue mixing is another strength. Conversations are clear and balanced. There is no excessive background noise drowning out speech. This clarity is important because many of the film's confrontations are verbal rather than physical. When McCall speaks calmly to someone he intends to punish, every word carries weight. The sound mix ensures that the audience hears the quiet intensity in his voice. The score becomes more pronounced during emotional scenes. When McCall reflects on Susan Plummer's death, the music shifts to softer, more somber tones. These moments are not dramatic or overwhelming. Instead, the music supports a feeling of restrained grief. The emotional cues are subtle, matching McCall's personality. During the final confrontation with Dave York, the music builds gradually but never becomes overpowering. The focus remains on environmental sound and physical movement. This decision keeps the climax grounded and intense rather than theatrical. Overall, the sound design, music, and score in The Equalizer 2 operate with discipline and purpose. The film uses minimalism, silence, realistic effects, and controlled musical themes to enhance tension and emotion. Rather than dominating scenes, the audio elements support character psychology and narrative pacing. Through careful balance and precision, the soundscape strengthens the film's atmosphere and reinforces its identity as a calculated and emotionally grounded thriller. The production design of The Equalizer 2 plays a critical role in shaping the film's grounded and realistic tone. Every location, interior space, and environmental detail is carefully constructed to reflect the psychological state of the characters, especially Robert McCall. The film does not rely on extravagant or stylized sets. Instead, it uses practical, believable environments that enhance authenticity and tension. Much of the story takes place in Boston and surrounding Massachusetts areas. The urban setting immediately establishes familiarity. Streets, apartment buildings, cafes, and public transportation systems are presented in a natural way. There is no exaggerated glamour. The city feels lived in. This realism supports the idea that McCall operates within everyday society. He is not hiding in secret underground facilities. He moves through ordinary neighborhoods. McCall's apartment is one of the most important interior spaces in the film. The design of his living space reflects discipline and simplicity. The furniture is minimal. Everything is organized and clean. There are books, tools, and objects placed with precision. This controlled environment mirrors his personality. Nothing appears random. Even the color tones in his apartment lean toward neutral shades, reinforcing calmness and order. The Lyft car McCall drives also becomes an extension of his character. It is clean and well-maintained, representing structure and routine. The car acts as a moving observation post. Through this confined space, the audience sees a variety of social situations. The production design inside the vehicle remains practical and realistic, helping viewers feel present in each interaction. The home of Miles and his mother presents a different atmosphere. Their apartment feels more crowded and slightly worn. The design communicates economic struggle without exaggeration. Walls, furniture, and lighting subtly suggest limited resources. This contrast between McCall's controlled space and Miles' uncertain environment visually reinforces the mentorship dynamic. McCall represents order. Miles' world feels unstable. One of the most emotionally meaningful locations is the apartment of Sam Rubinstein, the elderly Holocaust survivor. His home is filled with books, photographs, and historical artifacts. The production design here emphasizes memory and legacy. The space feels warm and intellectual. It contrasts with the colder environments seen in action sequences. This location symbolizes reflection and unresolved history, supporting the subplot about lost love and identity. Corporate and intelligence-related environments in the film are designed with sterility and professionalism. Offices and hotel rooms connected to Susan Plummer's investigation appear polished but impersonal. Clean lines, neutral colors, and modern furniture create a sense of official authority. However, this polished look also highlights hidden corruption. Beneath the organized surfaces, betrayal exists. The most visually striking production design appears in the final act, set in a coastal town during an approaching hurricane. This small seaside community feels isolated and quiet. Wooden houses, narrow streets, and open shorelines create vulnerability. As residents evacuate, the town becomes nearly empty. The absence of people transforms the setting into a contained battleground. McCall's coastal home under renovation plays a symbolic role. The unfinished walls and exposed structures represent rebuilding and unfinished emotional business. It is a space tied to his past and memories of his late wife. The simplicity of the house contrasts with the chaos of the storm outside. As the hurricane intensifies, the production design integrates environmental destruction. Broken signs, flying debris, flickering lights, and flooded streets create a sense of danger. These practical elements make the climax feel immersive. The town becomes an active participant in the conflict rather than just a backdrop. Lighting within these locations further enhances mood. Dim interiors and natural light sources maintain realism. There are no exaggerated neon tones or artificial colors. The grounded visual approach keeps the film serious and mature. Overall, the production design, sets, and locations in the Equalizer 2 emphasize authenticity and psychological alignment. Urban Boston grounds the story in reality. Interior spaces reflect character identity. The coastal town provides isolation for the final confrontation. Through practical design choices and environmental storytelling, the film strengthens its themes of order, memory, betrayal, and justice. Every location serves narrative purpose rather than visual spectacle. In the Equalizer 2, visual effects are used with restraint and purpose. Unlike many modern action films that rely heavily on computer-generated imagery, this movie prioritizes practical effects and grounded realism. The approach supports the film's overall tone, which is serious, controlled, and believable. The effects are designed to enhance the story without distracting from character or performance. One of the most important aspects of the film's effects work is its subtlety. Many viewers may not immediately notice the visual effects because they are integrated seamlessly into real environments. Instead of large-scale digital spectacle, the film focuses on realistic enhancements. This choice keeps the audience immersed in the world rather than reminding them they are watching a production. Practical effects dominate the fight sequences. Physical impacts, broken objects, and environmental damage are created on set whenever possible. When McCall uses everyday items as weapons, such as tools or kitchen objects, the damage appears tangible. Glass shatters convincingly. Furniture breaks with weight. Blood effects are restrained but realistic. This commitment to practical work makes each confrontation feel immediate and physical. Stunt coordination plays a major role in the realism of the action. The actors and stunt performers execute carefully choreographed movements that prioritize precision over spectacle. There is no exaggerated slow motion or unrealistic physics. The physicality feels grounded. This practical approach aligns with McCall's methodical combat style. He is efficient, not flashy. The effects support that efficiency. The most significant visual effects appear during the hurricane sequence in the final act. Creating a full-scale storm environment requires a combination of practical and digital techniques. Wind machines, water rigs, and physical debris are used on set to create authentic movement. Actors interact with real wind and rain, which enhances performance credibility. However, digital effects are layered on top to expand the scale of the storm. Computer-generated elements enhance the intensity of the hurricane without overpowering the scene. Flying debris, crashing waves, and darkened skies are digitally extended to create a sense of danger. These effects are blended carefully with practical footage so that transitions feel natural. The storm becomes a character in the story, but it never feels artificial or exaggerated. Lighting effects during the hurricane also contribute to tension. Flickering power lines and sudden flashes of light simulate electrical instability. Some of these effects are created practically on set, while others are enhanced digitally. The balance between the two ensures consistency. The audience believes the environment is unstable and dangerous. Gunfire effects are handled with precision. Muzzle flashes, bullet impacts, and environmental reactions are kept realistic. There are no exaggerated explosions or stylized slow-motion shots. When a weapon is fired, the sound and visual impact are direct and controlled. This realistic depiction maintains the film's grounded tone. Digital enhancements are also used subtly in urban scenes. Background extensions, minor crowd adjustments, and environmental cleanups ensure continuity without drawing attention. These invisible effects maintain immersion. The goal is not spectacle but consistency. Importantly, the film avoids overusing large-scale destruction. There are no collapsing skyscrapers or massive explosions. Even during intense moments, the scale remains personal. The effects serve character conflict rather than overshadowing it. This restraint reinforces the emotional focus of the story. The combination of practical and digital effects reflects discipline in production design. Real locations are enhanced rather than replaced. Physical props are prioritized over computer-generated objects. This approach supports the performances, allowing actors to interact with tangible elements. Overall, the visual effects and practical effects in The Equalizer 2 are defined by realism and balance. Practical stunt work, controlled environmental damage, and carefully integrated digital enhancements create a believable world. The hurricane sequence stands out as the most visually complex section, blending physical and digital techniques effectively. Through restraint and precision, the effects enhance tension without sacrificing authenticity. The result is an action film that feels grounded, immersive, and emotionally focused rather than exaggerated or artificial. The screenplay of The Equalizer 2, written by Richard Wenk, continues the grounded and character-focused approach established in the first film. The dialogue is controlled, deliberate, and often minimal. Rather than relying on long speeches or dramatic monologues, the script communicates tension through restraint. Conversations are sharp, purposeful, and loaded with subtext. This approach aligns perfectly with Robert McCall's personality. One of the strongest qualities of the screenplay is efficiency. characters rarely waste words. When McCall speaks, he does so with precision. His sentences are clear and direct. He does not threaten loudly or exaggerate emotion. Instead, he states facts calmly. This calm delivery often makes his words more intimidating. For example, when he confronts someone involved in wrongdoing, his tone remains steady. The lack of raised volume creates psychological pressure. The script also uses repetition as a subtle tool. McCall frequently asks direct questions and waits for honest answers. The pauses between his questions are just as important as the words themselves. Silence becomes part of the dialogue. These pauses give scenes weight and create anticipation. The screenplay understands that tension does not always require noise. The mentorship storyline with Miles provides a different tone of dialogue. Conversations between McCall and Miles are softer and more reflective. McCall speaks like a teacher rather than an enforcer. His advice is simple but meaningful. He encourages discipline, focus, and responsibility. The script avoids preachy language. Instead, it presents guidance through natural conversation. This balance keeps the relationship authentic. Susan Plummer's dialogue establishes professionalism and trust. Her conversations with McCall feel familiar and respectful. The screenplay uses their exchanges to hint at shared history without heavy exposition. Their dynamic feels lived in. This makes her death emotionally impactful because the audience believes in their connection. Dave York's dialogue introduces ideological conflict. When York explains his motives, the script allows him to justify his actions logically. He does not speak like a stereotypical villain. He presents his philosophy as practical and realistic. This choice strengthens the moral contrast between him and McCall. Their verbal confrontations are not just about accusations. They represent opposing worldviews. The screenplay also limits excessive backstory. Instead of lengthy flashbacks or explanations, the script trusts the audience to infer past experiences through behavior and tone. McCall's history as a former operative is referenced but not over-explained. This restraint keeps the narrative focused on present conflict. Humor in the film is subtle and rare. When it appears, it comes naturally from character interactions rather than forced jokes. Small exchanges in the Lyft car or gentle moments with Miles provide light relief without breaking tone. The script maintains seriousness while allowing brief human warmth. Structurally, the screenplay follows a clear progression. The first act establishes routine and character relationships. The second act shifts into investigation and betrayal. The final act delivers confrontation and resolution. Dialogue supports each phase appropriately. Early conversations build familiarity. Midpoint exchanges increase tension. Final confrontations become more direct and decisive. Another strength is the script's control over exposition. Information about the conspiracy is revealed gradually. Characters do not explain everything immediately. Clues are uncovered through conversation and action. This gradual reveal maintains suspense and avoids overwhelming the audience. Importantly, the screenplay keeps McCall consistent. His moral code remains stable throughout the story. His dialogue reflects certainty and clarity. Even when betrayed, he does not become chaotic or emotional in speech. This consistency reinforces his identity as disciplined and principled. Overall, the dialogue and screenplay of The Equalizer 2 emphasize restraint, precision, and character-driven conflict. The script avoids dramatic excess and instead builds tension through calm exchanges and meaningful pauses. Conversations feel purposeful, and ideological differences are expressed clearly without exaggeration. Through controlled writing and subtle emotional layering, the screenplay strengthens the film's grounded tone and reinforces its central themes of justice, loyalty, and accountability. The Equalizer 2 operates primarily within the action thriller genre, but its execution shows careful control and variation. Rather than delivering non-stop spectacle, the film blends elements of crime drama, character study, and psychological tension. The genre identity is clear, yet it is handled with restraint. This balance allows the movie to shift tone without losing consistency. At its core, the film is a revenge-driven thriller. A trusted ally is murdered, and the protagonist sets out to uncover the truth and deliver justice. However, unlike many revenge films that focus purely on anger and destruction, this story emphasizes calculation and moral clarity. The action is not chaotic. It is measured. This disciplined approach distinguishes the film from more explosive genre counterparts. The opening sequence establishes the action thriller foundation. A rescue mission on a train introduces tension and violence early. This scene signals to the audience that the film will contain intense confrontations. However, after this initial burst of action, the tone shifts into something quieter and more reflective. The narrative slows down. The focus moves toward daily life, mentorship, and community interactions. This early shift introduces drama into the genre framework. The mentorship subplot with Miles adds a coming-of-age layer to the film. These scenes feel different from the investigative or violent sequences. The tone becomes softer and more introspective. Conversations about art, discipline, and life choices provide emotional warmth. These moments prevent the film from becoming one-dimensional. The shift in tone broadens the genre experience without breaking narrative cohesion. When Susan Plummer is killed, the tone changes again. The film transitions from community-focused drama into investigative thriller. The pacing tightens. Conversations become more strategic. The atmosphere grows heavier. This tonal shift feels natural because it is driven by character motivation rather than random escalation. The emotional stakes increase, but the film maintains control. The genre execution becomes more intense during confrontation scenes. Action sequences are sharp and efficient. Unlike high-budget blockbusters that rely on exaggerated explosions, The Equalizer 2 keeps violence grounded. The tone during these moments is serious rather than flashy. The brutality is quick and purposeful. This realistic approach strengthens the thriller identity. Another important tonal shift occurs when betrayal is revealed. Discovering that Dave York is responsible for Susan's death transforms the story from mystery to personal conflict. The emotional tone becomes colder and more focused. The genre moves deeper into psychological territory. The conflict is no longer about solving a case. It becomes about confronting corrupted loyalty. The final act introduces a survival thriller element. Set during a hurricane in an evacuated coastal town, the environment intensifies the tone. The storm creates isolation and unpredictability. Wind and rain replace urban noise. The genre temporarily shifts toward environmental suspense. This addition adds variety while staying aligned with the central narrative. Despite these tonal changes, the film never feels inconsistent. The director maintains thematic unity. Justice, accountability, and moral responsibility remain central throughout. Even when the tone softens in mentorship scenes, the underlying tension of McCall's identity persists. This continuity ensures that genre shifts enhance rather than disrupt the story. Humor is minimal and subtle. Light moments exist, but they never undermine seriousness. This disciplined tone management prevents emotional whiplash. The audience transitions smoothly between warmth and tension. The film also avoids excessive melodrama. Emotional scenes are restrained. Grief is expressed quietly. Confrontations are controlled. This measured tone reinforces realism and keeps the thriller grounded. Overall, The Equalizer 2 executes its genre with maturity and precision. It blends action, crime drama, and psychological tension without losing focus. Tone shifts occur naturally as the narrative evolves, moving from community warmth to investigative suspense to storm-driven survival. Each shift supports character development and thematic depth. The result is a film that respects its genre roots while expanding emotional range and maintaining disciplined storytelling. At its core, The Equalizer 2 is not just an action thriller. It is a story built around strong moral themes and clear philosophical questions. Beneath the violence and suspense, the film explores justice, loyalty, mentorship, accountability, and the idea of personal code. Every major conflict in the story connects back to these deeper messages. The action may drive the plot, but the themes give it meaning. The most dominant theme in the film is justice versus corruption. Robert McCall operates outside the law, yet he follows a strict moral code. He does not act randomly or selfishly. He targets those who exploit others. His actions may be violent, but they are guided by principle. The film repeatedly contrasts McCall's sense of justice with the corruption of former operatives who choose money over morality. This opposition creates the central philosophical conflict. Dave York represents the theme of moral compromise. He believes survival and profit justify unethical actions. In his worldview, loyalty and idealism are weaknesses. Through York, the film asks an important question: what happens when people trained to protect others lose their ethical boundaries? York is not chaotic or unstable. He is rational. That rationality makes his corruption more dangerous. His character shows how easily power can be redirected for personal gain. In contrast, McCall represents moral consistency. Even though he lives in secrecy and uses violence, his internal code remains stable. He believes that power must protect the vulnerable. His actions are not driven by revenge alone. They are driven by accountability. This difference between McCall and York reinforces the message that character is defined by choices, not circumstances. Another powerful theme is mentorship and guidance. McCall's relationship with Miles introduces hope into the story. Miles stands at a crossroads. He is talented but surrounded by negative influences. McCall does not force him into change. Instead, he offers structure and belief. The message here is clear: guidance can redirect potential. Through patience and discipline, McCall helps Miles see a future beyond his environment. This mentorship theme softens McCall's image. He is not only a man who destroys threats. He is also someone who builds futures. The film suggests that true justice is not only about punishment but also about prevention. Helping Miles succeed prevents future violence. This idea expands the meaning of justice beyond retaliation. Loyalty is another central theme. Susan Plummer's death symbolizes broken trust within a professional community. She represents integrity within a flawed system. Her murder reveals betrayal from within. The emotional weight of her loss reinforces the importance of loyalty among those who serve together. McCall's reaction is not explosive anger but controlled determination. His mission honors loyalty rather than personal ego. The theme of isolation also runs through the film. McCall lives alone. He keeps emotional distance from most people. His quiet routines reflect self-imposed separation. However, through Miles and his community interactions, the film suggests that isolation is not strength. Connection provides purpose. By the end of the story, McCall remains independent, but he is less emotionally distant. Another subtle theme is balance. The title itself implies equilibrium. McCall seeks to equalize injustice. When someone abuses power, he restores balance. This concept repeats throughout the narrative. Every confrontation feels like a correction rather than chaos. The message suggests that systems sometimes fail, and individuals must step forward to restore fairness. The hurricane in the final act reinforces emotional themes symbolically. The storm represents internal conflict and betrayal. When it passes, calm returns. This mirrors McCall's journey from disruption to resolution. Overall, The Equalizer 2 communicates clear core messages. Justice requires principle. Loyalty defines character. Guidance can change lives. Power without ethics leads to corruption. Through controlled storytelling and moral contrast, the film delivers more than action. It presents a disciplined exploration of responsibility and choice. Beyond its surface as a revenge-driven action thriller, The Equalizer 2 contains layered symbolism and quiet visual metaphors that deepen its narrative. These symbolic elements are never presented in an exaggerated or obvious way. Instead, they operate subtly, reinforcing themes of balance, betrayal, identity, and emotional isolation. The film's hidden meanings are embedded in objects, environments, and recurring visual patterns. The most prominent symbol in the film is the hurricane in the final act. On a literal level, it creates a dangerous and isolated battlefield. But symbolically, the storm represents emotional turbulence and internal conflict. As McCall uncovers betrayal from someone he once trusted, his calm exterior begins to shift internally. The approaching storm mirrors that rising tension. The wind intensifies as the confrontation draws closer. When the storm finally reaches full force, it parallels the emotional climax between McCall and Dave York. After York is defeated, the storm passes. Calm returns. This reflects the restoration of balance. Another recurring symbolic element is the concept of rebuilding. McCall owns a coastal home that is under renovation. The unfinished walls and exposed structures symbolize incomplete emotional closure. The house is tied to memories of his late wife, representing grief that has not fully healed. As the story progresses, the house becomes the setting for final confrontation. This suggests that before McCall can fully rebuild his life, he must confront unresolved betrayal from his past. The physical structure mirrors his internal state. Books and reading also function symbolically throughout the film. McCall is frequently shown reading classic literature. These moments are not random. Books symbolize knowledge, reflection, and moral grounding. They reinforce his disciplined and thoughtful personality. In contrast to impulsive violence, reading represents intellectual control. It suggests that McCall's strength is not only physical but philosophical. The Lyft car McCall drives can also be interpreted symbolically. It represents mobility between worlds. Inside the car, he moves through different social environments. He observes people from varied backgrounds. The car acts as a bridge between his hidden life as a vigilante and his visible life as an ordinary citizen. It reflects dual identity. He exists between two realities, never fully belonging to either. Mirrors and reflective surfaces appear subtly in several scenes. These reflections suggest self-examination and duality. McCall often stands near windows or glass when observing situations. This visual pattern reinforces the idea that he constantly evaluates both others and himself. Reflection becomes a metaphor for moral awareness. The elderly Holocaust survivor, Sam Rubinstein, carries symbolic weight as well. His search for closure regarding a lost love connects to themes of memory and unfinished history. Sam represents the idea that past pain never fully disappears. His presence reminds the audience that unresolved emotional wounds can persist across decades. This parallels McCall's own unresolved grief. Dave York embodies symbolic corruption within institutions. As a former operative who once served a greater purpose, York now uses his skills for profit. He symbolizes what happens when loyalty is replaced by greed. His character reflects the hidden danger within systems that appear organized and professional on the surface. Through York, the film comments on moral decay beneath structured authority. Water imagery appears throughout the film, particularly during the hurricane sequence. Water can symbolize cleansing or destruction. In this case, it does both. The storm destroys parts of the town, but it also clears the path for resolution. After the storm, calm water suggests restored equilibrium. Even silence carries symbolic meaning. McCall's quiet demeanor represents control and restraint. He rarely speaks unnecessarily. This silence symbolizes discipline. In contrast, chaotic environments are filled with noise. The difference reinforces his role as a stabilizing force. Overall, The Equalizer 2 uses symbolism carefully and subtly. The hurricane represents emotional conflict. The unfinished house reflects incomplete healing. Books symbolize intellectual discipline. Reflections highlight dual identity. Through these layered visual and narrative symbols, the film deepens its exploration of justice, loyalty, and balance without ever stating its meanings directly. While The Equalizer 2 presents itself primarily as an action thriller, it also contains subtle social and cultural commentary beneath its surface narrative. The film does not deliver heavy political speeches or overt ideological statements. Instead, it explores themes related to institutional failure, community responsibility, generational guidance, and moral accountability within modern society. These elements give the story relevance beyond personal revenge. One of the clearest social commentaries in the film is the idea of institutional corruption. Robert McCall and his former colleagues once worked within official intelligence systems designed to protect national interests. However, The betrayal at the center of the story reveals that even structured institutions can be compromised. Dave York and his team represent individuals who manipulate their skills for profit rather than public safety. This reflects a broader concern about what happens when trained power operates without oversight or ethics. The film suggests that systems designed to protect people are not always reliable. Susan Plummer's investigation into suspicious activity indicates that corruption can hide beneath formal authority. Her death reinforces the idea that truth can be dangerous when it threatens powerful interests. Although the movie avoids direct political references, it highlights the vulnerability of trust within institutional frameworks. Another important layer of commentary relates to community and social responsibility. McCall does not limit his actions to large conspiracies. He intervenes in everyday injustices. Early in the film, he protects a young woman from exploitation. He assists people who are being manipulated or abused. These smaller interventions suggest that injustice is not limited to large criminal organizations. It exists in daily life. The mentorship of Miles introduces commentary on youth vulnerability and environmental influence. Miles is intelligent and artistically gifted, but he lives in a neighborhood where gang involvement is a real threat. The film subtly addresses how social environment shapes opportunity. Miles does not lack talent. He lacks direction and guidance. Through McCall's mentorship, the film suggests that positive role models can interrupt cycles of violence. This reflects a broader cultural message about community involvement in youth development. There is also commentary on isolation within modern urban life. McCall lives quietly, almost invisibly, despite moving through crowded cities. His Lyft driving job symbolizes how people interact daily without truly connecting. Passengers share brief conversations, then disappear. This reflects a modern reality where proximity does not equal community. McCall's deeper connections, such as with Miles and Sam Rubinstein, stand in contrast to this surface-level interaction. The character of Sam, a Holocaust survivor searching for lost love, introduces generational memory as cultural commentary. His presence reminds viewers of historical trauma and the importance of remembrance. While this subplot is small, it emphasizes the idea that personal history shapes identity. The film suggests that unresolved past experiences continue to influence present behavior. On a cultural level, the movie also challenges the traditional image of heroism. McCall is not a young, flashy protagonist. He is older, disciplined, and introspective. Casting Denzel Washington in this role offers representation of strength grounded in experience rather than physical dominance alone. The film presents maturity as an asset rather than a limitation. The hurricane setting in the final act may also reflect commentary on vulnerability. Natural disasters expose structural weaknesses in communities. The evacuated coastal town becomes a space where systems are temporarily absent. In that vacuum, personal morality determines behavior. This setting underscores the film's belief that individual character matters when institutions fail. Importantly, the film avoids extreme ideological positioning. It does not argue for dismantling systems, nor does it blindly defend them. Instead, it emphasizes personal responsibility. When institutions fail, individuals must decide how to respond. Overall, The Equalizer 2 offers subtle social and cultural commentary through its portrayal of corruption, mentorship, isolation, and moral responsibility. Rather than presenting political slogans, it embeds its observations within character choices and narrative events. The message is clear but measured. Power requires ethics, communities require guidance, and justice often begins with individual accountability. The Equalizer 2 delivers several powerful scenes that leave lasting impressions because of their emotional weight, precision, and atmosphere. These moments stand out not just for action, but for tension, character revelation, and symbolic meaning. Each memorable scene reflects the disciplined tone of the film while deepening the story's impact. The opening train sequence in Turkey immediately captures attention. McCall boards a train with calm confidence, tracking men who kidnapped a young girl. The suspense builds slowly as he studies their behavior. He sits quietly, observing, asking subtle questions. When the confrontation begins, It is swift and controlled. The fight is not chaotic. It is efficient. The confined train environment intensifies the scene. This opening establishes McCall's skill, intelligence, and moral code in a single sequence. Another impactful scene occurs when McCall confronts a group of men who assaulted a young woman. He enters their apartment calmly, almost politely. The tension comes from stillness. He offers them a chance to confess and compensate the victim. His tone remains steady. When they refuse, the violence unfolds quickly. What makes this scene memorable is the contrast between civility and sudden brutality. McCall's composure makes the outcome feel inevitable. Susan Plummer's death marks one of the most emotionally significant moments in the film. The scene itself is not exaggerated. It unfolds with sudden violence during what appears to be a routine investigation. The impact comes afterward, when McCall learns of her murder. His reaction is quiet. There is no dramatic outburst. Instead, the camera lingers on his face as he processes the loss. This restraint amplifies the emotional weight. The audience feels the shift in the story's direction. The restaurant confrontation between McCall and Dave York is another standout moment. They sit across from each other calmly, discussing Susan's death. The tension lies in what is not said directly. York attempts to rationalize his actions. McCall listens carefully, analyzing every word. The scene is powerful because it represents ideological conflict rather than physical violence. Two former allies face each other, knowing only one will survive. McCall's mentorship scenes with Miles are memorable for their emotional warmth. One particularly meaningful moment occurs when McCall visits Miles' home and challenges him to take his artistic talent seriously. He pushes him to apply to art school. The scene is quiet but powerful. It reveals McCall's desire to protect potential, not just punish wrongdoing. These interactions provide emotional balance to the darker parts of the story. The final act in the hurricane-stricken coastal town delivers several unforgettable scenes. As residents evacuate, the empty streets create isolation. The storm intensifies. Wind roars through buildings. McCall uses the environment strategically, separating York's team members one by one. Each confrontation feels personal and calculated. The use of darkness, water, and debris makes these scenes visually striking. One particularly tense moment occurs when McCall lures one of York's men into a narrow alley during the storm. The limited visibility heightens suspense. The sound of wind replaces music. The confrontation is brief but brutal. The environment feels like an extension of McCall's strategy. The final fight between McCall and York is emotionally charged. They struggle physically, but the deeper conflict is personal betrayal. When McCall ultimately defeats York, it does not feel triumphant. It feels necessary. The storm surrounding them emphasizes the intensity of the moment. The closing scenes, where McCall reconnects with Miles and sees him accepted into art school, provide quiet resolution. The calm after the storm reinforces the film's theme of restored balance. Overall, the most memorable scenes in The Equalizer 2 combine emotional restraint with controlled intensity. Whether through quiet conversation or storm-driven confrontation, these moments remain impactful because they prioritize character and tension over spectacle. The Equalizer 2 exists within a recognizable action thriller tradition, yet it distinguishes itself through tone, character focus, and pacing. When compared to similar vigilante-driven films or even Antoine Fuqua's own filmography, the movie reveals both familiar influences and deliberate departures. Understanding these comparisons helps clarify what makes this sequel unique. The most obvious comparison is to the first film, The Equalizer, released in 2014. Both movies center on Robert McCall as a former Black Ops operative who uses his skills to protect vulnerable individuals. However, while the first film functions largely as an origin story for McCall's return to action, the sequel deepens his emotional landscape. The original focused heavily on external injustice, particularly organized crime exploitation. The sequel shifts toward personal betrayal and moral confrontation. In that sense, The Equalizer 2 feels more introspective and character-driven than its predecessor. Compared to other vigilante films like Taken starring Liam Neeson, The Equalizer 2 adopts a more restrained pace. Taken emphasizes urgency, high-speed pursuit, and rapid escalation. In contrast, McCall's approach is methodical. He studies his targets before acting. The tension builds through silence and calculation rather than constant movement. This slower rhythm sets the film apart from more adrenaline-focused thrillers. Another relevant comparison is the John Wick franchise. Both feature highly skilled former operatives drawn back into violence. However, John Wick leans into stylized action, elaborate choreography, and a heightened criminal underworld mythology. The Equalizer 2 remains grounded in realism. There is no secret global assassin network or exaggerated spectacle. McCall's world feels closer to everyday society. This realism gives the film a more serious tone. When placed alongside other Denzel Washington thrillers, such as Man on Fire, similarities emerge in emotional intensity and themes of protection. In Man on Fire, Washington also portrays a man haunted by his past who channels violence toward justice. However, Man on Fire is more emotionally explosive and visually stylized. The Equalizer 2 is calmer and more disciplined. Its emotional expression is internal rather than dramatic. Looking at Antoine Fuqua's broader body of work provides additional context. Fuqua has directed films like Training Day, Shooter, and Olympus Has Fallen. In Training Day, he explored corruption within law enforcement through intense character confrontation. That theme of institutional betrayal resurfaces in The Equalizer 2. However, the tone differs. Training Day thrives on volatile unpredictability, while The Equalizer 2 maintains steady control. Compared to Olympus Has Fallen, which relies on large-scale political crisis and explosive action, The Equalizer 2 operates on a smaller scale. Its conflict is personal rather than national. Fuqua's direction here feels more intimate, focusing on internal morality rather than global stakes. The hurricane climax in The Equalizer 2 also invites comparison to survival thrillers where environment shapes conflict. Yet unlike disaster-centered films that highlight mass destruction, this storm functions as symbolic backdrop for personal reckoning. It intensifies atmosphere without overshadowing character dynamics. Another subtle comparison can be made to classic Western films. McCall resembles the archetype of a lone gunslinger entering troubled communities to restore order. Like traditional Western heroes, he lives by a strict code and avoids unnecessary attention. The small coastal town in the final act mirrors isolated frontier settings where moral confrontations unfold away from institutional authority. Overall, while The Equalizer 2 shares DNA with modern action franchises and vigilante narratives, it distinguishes itself through measured pacing, moral clarity, and emotional restraint. It avoids exaggerated spectacle and instead prioritizes character-driven tension. Compared to Fuqua's other works and similar genre films, this sequel feels quieter but more focused. Its strength lies not in scale, but in discipline and psychological depth. The ending of The Equalizer 2 is both physically intense and emotionally symbolic. While the surface presents a violent confrontation between Robert McCall and Dave York, the deeper meaning revolves around betrayal, moral contrast, and the restoration of balance. The final act brings together every theme introduced earlier in the film and resolves them through controlled confrontation rather than spectacle. The climax takes place in a nearly abandoned coastal town as a powerful hurricane approaches. This setting is not accidental. The storm represents emotional chaos and unresolved conflict. As wind and rain consume the empty streets, the external environment mirrors the internal storm between McCall and York. The isolation of the town removes distractions. There are no civilians, no authorities, and no outside interference. This becomes a personal battlefield. York and his team travel to the coastal house that McCall is renovating. The unfinished home symbolizes incomplete emotional closure, especially connected to McCall's late wife and his past life. By choosing this location for the final confrontation, the film places betrayal directly inside McCall's personal space. It is not just a mission, it is an intrusion. As the storm intensifies, McCall strategically separates and eliminates York's team members one by one. Each confrontation is calculated. He uses the environment, darkness, and noise to his advantage. The hurricane becomes a tactical ally. This sequence reinforces McCall's identity as disciplined and precise. He does not lose control. Even surrounded by chaos, he remains steady. The final fight between McCall and York is stripped of large-scale spectacle. There are no dramatic speeches or exaggerated choreography. It is direct and personal. York attempts to justify his betrayal once again, framing it as survival and opportunity. However, McCall rejects that reasoning. Their confrontation represents a clash of philosophies. York believes morality is flexible. McCall believes it is fixed. When McCall ultimately defeats York, the act does not feel triumphant in a celebratory sense. It feels necessary. Justice is restored, but there is no visible joy in McCall's expression. This emotional restraint is important. The film does not glorify revenge. Instead, it presents accountability as unavoidable. York's fate is a consequence of his choices. As the hurricane passes, calm returns to the town. This visual transition symbolizes restored equilibrium. The chaos has cleared. The storm's departure mirrors the resolution of internal conflict. McCall stands alone, but he is no longer burdened by unanswered betrayal. The film then shifts to quieter closing scenes. Miles receives acceptance into art school, signaling hope and forward progress. McCall's mentorship has succeeded. This resolution reinforces one of the film's central messages. Justice is not only about punishment but also about guidance. By helping Miles choose a better path, McCall prevents future harm. In the final moments, McCall reconnects with the world beyond violence. He visits Sam Rubinstein to share information about his long-lost love, offering emotional closure. This act demonstrates that McCall's mission extends beyond combat. He restores balance wherever he can, whether through confrontation or compassion. The ending ultimately reinforces McCall's identity. He remains a solitary figure, operating outside formal systems. However, he is not emotionally isolated in the same way as before. Through mentorship and connection, he has allowed himself limited bonds. The film suggests that while he cannot escape who he is, he can choose how to use his abilities. In final interpretation, The Equalizer 2 concludes not with explosive victory, but with restored balance. The storm clears. Betrayal is confronted. Guidance continues. McCall remains steady, principled, and disciplined. Justice, in his world, is not emotional chaos. It is calculated correction. The Equalizer 2 was produced with an estimated budget of approximately $62 million. For a modern action thriller led by a major star like Denzel Washington, this budget was considered moderate. It was not as massive as large-scale superhero franchises or global disaster films, but it was substantial enough to support high-quality production design, location shooting, practical effects, and carefully executed action sequences. The financial approach reflected the film's grounded tone. Instead of spending heavily on exaggerated visual spectacle, the production invested in controlled environments, experienced crew members, and strong performances. When the film was released in the United States on July 20, 2018, it performed strongly at the box office. During its opening weekend, it earned over $36 million domestically. This was a solid debut, especially considering that it was competing with other summer releases. The opening demonstrated that audiences remained connected to the character of Robert McCall and trusted Denzel Washington to deliver another disciplined action performance. As its theatrical run continued, The Equalizer 2 accumulated more than $100 million in the domestic market alone. Internationally, it also performed steadily, adding significant revenue from overseas audiences. By the end of its global run, the film had earned over $190 million worldwide. This result made it a clear commercial success, nearly tripling its production budget before accounting for marketing costs. The financial performance confirmed that the franchise had staying power. One important factor in the film's box office strength was Denzel Washington's consistent drawing power. Washington has built a reputation for reliability across multiple genres, especially thrillers and dramas. For many viewers, his presence guarantees quality and seriousness. This reputation likely contributed to the sequel's strong opening numbers. Critical reception for The Equalizer 2 was mixed to moderately positive. Many critics praised Washington's performance, highlighting his calm intensity and commanding screen presence. Reviewers often noted that even when the story followed familiar revenge thriller patterns, Washington's portrayal elevated the material. His ability to communicate emotion through restraint was frequently recognized as the film's strongest asset. The action sequences also received positive attention. Critics appreciated the clarity of choreography and the realistic tone of the violence. The hurricane set finale, in particular, was often mentioned as visually engaging and atmospherically tense. The combination of environmental suspense and tactical combat was considered effective. However, some critics felt that the screenplay relied on predictable genre elements. The betrayal twist and revenge structure were viewed by some as conventional. A few reviews mentioned that the pacing in the middle section slowed the momentum. Despite these critiques, the overall consensus acknowledged that the film delivered solid entertainment within its genre framework. Audience reception tended to be more favorable than critical reception. Many viewers appreciated the emotional depth added to McCall's character. The mentorship storyline involving Miles resonated strongly with audiences who valued the human dimension of the narrative. CinemaScore polling reflected generally positive audience satisfaction, indicating that viewers felt the film met expectations. From a franchise perspective, the financial and audience response demonstrated stability. While the sequel did not dramatically exceed the success of the first film, it maintained consistent performance. This consistency reinforced the viability of continuing the character's story in future installments. In industry terms, The Equalizer 2 represented a successful mid-budget action sequel driven by star power and disciplined production choices. It did not rely on global marketing spectacle or franchise universes. Instead, it depended on character loyalty and grounded storytelling. Overall, the combination of moderate budget, strong box office return, steady international performance, and solid audience response positioned The Equalizer 2 as a commercially successful and respected sequel. Its reception confirmed that viewers valued its balance of action, moral clarity, and character focus. The Equalizer 2 offers strong rewatch value, not because it relies on shocking twists or unpredictable spectacle, but because of its layered tension, disciplined pacing, and character-driven storytelling. Unlike action films that depend entirely on surprise, this movie gains strength through atmosphere, performance, and subtle detail. When viewers revisit it, they often notice elements they may have missed during the first viewing. One reason the film holds up on repeat viewing is Denzel Washington's performance. His portrayal of Robert McCall is built on quiet expression and minimal dialogue. On a first watch, viewers may focus primarily on plot progression and action sequences. However, during a second viewing, small gestures and facial expressions become more noticeable. Subtle pauses, eye movements, and shifts in tone reveal additional emotional depth. These understated details enhance appreciation for the character. The investigative structure of the story also benefits from rewatching. Once the audience knows that Dave York is responsible for Susan Plummer's death, earlier scenes take on new meaning. Conversations between McCall and York feel different when viewed with awareness of the betrayal. Small behavioral clues become more apparent. This layered storytelling adds narrative richness. The mentorship storyline involving Miles increases emotional resonance during repeat viewings. Watching their interactions again highlights how gradually McCall influences Miles' decisions. The guidance does not happen through dramatic speeches but through consistent presence. Viewers may gain a deeper appreciation for how subtle encouragement shapes Miles' transformation. The hurricane climax also carries strong rewatch value. Knowing how the confrontation unfolds allows viewers to focus on environmental details and strategic planning. The way McCall uses the storm to isolate his enemies becomes clearer. The tension feels different when the outcome is known, but the precision of execution remains compelling. Another factor that enhances rewatch appeal is the film's grounded realism. The action sequences are not exaggerated or dependent on heavy digital effects. Because they are controlled and practical, they do not feel outdated quickly. The realism helps maintain credibility over time. From an audience takeaway perspective, the film leaves viewers with reflections on justice and responsibility. McCall's actions may be extreme, but his motivations are rooted in principle. The story emphasizes that power requires ethical direction. This theme resonates beyond entertainment. It encourages viewers to consider personal accountability in everyday situations. The mentorship element delivers another important takeaway: guidance matters. Miles represents potential at risk. Through patience and discipline, McCall helps redirect that potential toward a constructive path. The message suggests that individual intervention can prevent larger harm. Justice is not only reactive punishment, it can also be proactive support. The film also reinforces the value of consistency in character. McCall does not change who he is at his core. Instead, he reaffirms his moral code when challenged. This consistency offers a sense of stability. In a world where betrayal and corruption exist, integrity becomes the defining trait of strength. Emotionally, the film leaves a balanced impression. It does not conclude with loud celebration. It ends with quiet resolution. The storm passes. Balance is restored. Miles moves forward. This calm conclusion gives viewers space to reflect rather than overwhelming them with spectacle. Because of its disciplined tone, strong lead performance, and thematic clarity, The Equalizer 2 maintains relevance beyond its initial release. It invites viewers to revisit its tension, analyze its moral contrasts, and appreciate its subtle craftsmanship. Overall, the rewatch value lies in detail, performance, and atmosphere. The audience takeaway centers on justice guided by principle, mentorship shaping futures, and loyalty defining character. These elements give the film lasting resonance and thoughtful impact. The Equalizer 2 is widely accessible through multiple viewing platforms, making it convenient for audiences who want to experience or revisit the film. As a major studio release distributed by Columbia Pictures, the movie has maintained strong availability across physical media, digital rental services, and streaming platforms over the years. The exact platform options may vary depending on your country and current licensing agreements, but there are several reliable ways to watch it. One of the most traditional ways to watch The Equalizer 2 is through physical media. The film is available on Blu-ray and DVD. These formats typically include high-definition video quality, surround sound options, and sometimes bonus features such as behind-the-scenes footage, interviews with cast and crew, and commentary tracks. For viewers who value consistent quality without depending on internet speed, physical copies provide a stable and reliable option. Blu-ray editions, in particular, offer enhanced visual clarity and stronger audio performance, which can significantly improve the experience of the hurricane sequence and detailed action scenes. Digital rental and purchase platforms are another common way to watch the film. Major online marketplaces frequently offer the movie for rent or permanent digital purchase. Renting allows viewers to stream the film for a limited period at a lower cost, while purchasing provides ongoing access in a digital library. These services often support high-definition and sometimes 4K resolution, depending on the device and subscription tier. For viewers who prefer convenience and immediate access, digital platforms are often the fastest option. Streaming services may also include The Equalizer 2 in their catalog depending on licensing cycles. Availability on subscription platforms changes periodically as distribution rights rotate between providers. It is common for action thrillers from major studios to appear on well-known streaming services for limited windows before moving to another platform. Checking the current catalog of major streaming services in your region will help determine whether the film is included in a subscription plan at any given time. Cable and satellite television networks sometimes broadcast the movie as part of their action or thriller programming blocks. While this option may include commercial interruptions, it remains a convenient way for viewers who rely on traditional television access. Scheduled broadcasts can introduce the film to audiences who may not actively search for it on digital platforms. For viewers seeking the best possible home viewing experience, watching the film on a high-definition screen with surround sound is recommended. The controlled sound design and detailed cinematography benefit from strong audio clarity and visual sharpness. The hurricane sequence, in particular, gains impact when wind, rain, and environmental effects are heard through a well-balanced sound system. Subtitles and closed captioning options are typically available across most platforms. This accessibility ensures that dialogue clarity is maintained, especially during quieter scenes where tension relies on subtle vocal delivery. For viewers who prefer additional language options, many digital versions offer multiple subtitle tracks depending on region. It is important to verify the legitimacy of the viewing source. Watching through authorized platforms ensures high-quality playback and supports the creators and distributors involved in production. Unauthorized streaming sites may offer inconsistent video quality, missing audio, or security risks. Overall, the Equalizer 2 remains widely available through physical discs, digital rental and purchase services, subscription streaming platforms, and television broadcasts. The best option depends on personal preference, device availability, and regional access. Whether experienced for the first time or revisited for its layered tension and character-driven storytelling, the film can be accessed conveniently through multiple legal viewing channels. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more gripping movie explanations like this.